Good morning, folks. I'm John McManus, and we're going to give it just a few more minutes before we start. I just wanted to let you know that we're here and you're here. So hold on for a little bit and we'll be with you in just a minute. Okay, well, I show 11 o'clock, so I think we can start. Just to make sure we're in the right place, this is the SFPUC Dennis Herrera press conference. I'm John McManus. I'm the president of the Golden State Salmon Association. We're here today to announce our opposition to Dennis Herrera as the next general manager at the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. I want to just take a minute to introduce my co-panelists before making a few remarks and then going to the other panelists. With us is Chris Schutz from the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance. Chris, you want to raise your hands? We know who, actually, you probably have your name on your screen. Doug OBrien with the Natural Resources Defense Council. Peter Dreckmeyer with the Tuolumne River Trust. John Rosenfield with San Francisco Baykeeper. Bill Martin with Sierra Club Bay Chapter. And Mike Conroy with the Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Associations. So with that said, I mentioned earlier that we're here to announce opposition to Dennis Herrera becoming the next general manager at the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. I'll tell you that salmon fishing representatives and conservationists were concerned a little over a week ago to learn that the SFPUC and Dennis Herrera sued the State Water Resources Control Board. The State Water Board was just trying to do its job protecting California's rivers and streams, including in this case, the Tuolumne River, from which San Francisco gets its water from. The lawsuit, unbelievably, cites the Trump administration as the proper source in interpreting the Clean Water Act. And the lawsuit holds that California has no authority to protect rivers like the Tuolumne, which is something that we just fundamentally disagree with. In fact, we think the San Francisco PUC should be working with the State Water Resources Control Board to protect and balance water use throughout the Central Valley in rivers, including the Tuolumne, rather than filing a lawsuit against these actions. I might mention too that the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission did not have the decency to even tell the San Francisco Board of Supervisors about this lawsuit before they filed it. So I'll take a break right there and I will go to Doug OBrien, who will have a few comments.
Good morning. As John said, I am Doug OBrien. I'm a senior attorney with the Natural Resources Defense Council. Our office is based in San Francisco. We have thousands of members and activists at NRDC who live within the city of San Francisco. NRDC had hoped not to take a position on the announcement of Dennis Herrera as the next general manager of the commission, and we had been working to set up a meeting with him before he took office so that we could get to know him and really better have a conversation and try to have a partnership with him. However, Mr. Herrera's inflammatory and misleading statements to the press and the specific claims in the lawsuit that he filed make clear in our view that he is not fit to serve as the next general manager of the commission. There's two particularly egregious claims in the lawsuit that justify our position. First, as Mr. McManus noted, the city's lawsuit relies on the Trump administration's regulation gutting the Federal Clean Water Act to argue that the state, and in this case the state, but the regulation also prohibits Native American tribes from establishing in-stream flows and, quote, other appropriate conditions of state law, end quote, under Section 401 of the Clean Water Act. This is a radical position that it would overturn two major decisions of the United States Supreme Court and is directly contrary to lawsuits that have been filed by the California Attorney General. It would fundamentally preempt the ability of the state to protect California's rivers for all Californians. And it is radically inconsistent with the viewpoints of the city of San Francisco's residents. Secondly, the city is also claiming that the state board in 2018, when it required that 40% of the water flow down the Tuolumne River, allowing farms and cities to divert 60%, constitutes a waste and unreasonable use and is unconstitutional. That position, which argues that the state should not protect our rivers and that it's a waste and unreasonable use, is fundamentally inconsistent with protections of the environment. We believe that it is important that the commission bring in new leadership that can rebuild trust with a broad range of stakeholders, including fishing and conservation groups, and help San Francisco live up to its ideals. Unfortunately, Mr. Herrera's statements to the press and the specific claims make him unfit for that position, and we therefore oppose his selection as general manager. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. A couple of other things I would like to add, and that is Supervisor Aaron Peskin introduced a resolution to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, basically to take a look at this lawsuit that was filed by the SFPUC, and any press that's interested in that resolution should feel free to contact Supervisor Peskin's office directly. The other thing I'd like to circle back on is you may wonder why we're involved with the Golden State Salmon Association. And it's because the overdiversion of the Tuolumne River has totally annihilated the salmon runs there. We had tens of thousands of salmon there as recently as just a few decades ago. Last year, I think we saw 1,000 come back. They're basically on life support. And the way that river is being handled harms waters downstream of it, including the San Joaquin River, which it flows into, and the bay and the Delta by extension. So what we seek is compromise and balance in order to get a more fair allocation of water to keep our salmon runs alive. The other thing I would point out is when Javier Becerra was the Attorney General here in California, he took on the Trump administration, and he took on the Trump administration specifically on environmental rules, among others, regarding air pollution, but also the Trump administration attack on the Clean Water Act. So it's so strange to see the SFPUC taking the side of the Trump administration when then AG Becerra basically stuck up for California and for our environment. So with that, I'm going to toss to Chris Schutz with the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance.
Good morning. I'm Chris Schutz with the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance. I've been working on the FERC licensing and related processes on the Tuolumne River for at least 10 years. I'd like to expand a little bit on the fourth bullet in our letter, which deals with the legal issues. The city's lawsuit doesn't just attack the State Water Board's decision relating to the Don Pedro hydroelectric project. It attacks the Water Board's legal right to make decisions. The Clean Water Act, the city's lawsuit relies on the Trump administration's unlawful rewrite of Section 401 of the Clean Water Act. That rewrite is founded on Justice Clarence Thomas's dissent in one of the Supreme Court cases we refer to in our letter, Jefferson PUD number 1. Jefferson said, a state gets to set conditions on the whole of an activity relating to a new federal license. Justice Thomas and the Trumpian rule say states can only regulate a discharge. In other words, pollution in the narrow sense. It is a sad day to see the city of San Francisco carrying the torch for a radical conservative on the US Supreme Court and for the Trump administration's rollback of foundational environmental law. With that, I'll turn it back to John.
Thank you, Chris. All the groups on this call have signed a letter and sent it to Mayor London Breed and to Sophie Maxwell, the head of the SFPUC. You can access that letter either on our website, goldenstatesalmon.org. You can also find it at sf4water.org, or get a hold of us and we'll get you a copy. And with that, I want to toss to John Rosenfield with the San Francisco Baykeeper.
Good morning, I'm John Rosenfield, Senior Scientist with San Francisco Baykeeper. And I want to say that Mr. Herrera's claims that the State Water Board ignored science in developing its water quality control plan are completely false. To back up a little bit, the Tuolumne River is one of the most overtapped rivers in California. In a typical year, 80% of the flow in that river is diverted. As a result, the Tuolumne has the worst performing salmon populations in the Central Valley. The Water Board conducted extensive scientific review and published, which led to a well-documented scientific basis report. And it showed that increased flows were necessary to increase juvenile salmon survival in rivers like the Tuolumne. The problem, as we see it, is that the Water Board didn't go far enough. California Department of Fish and Wildlife in 2013 comments to the Water Board noted that substantial evidence demonstrates that between 50 and 60% of the river's flow would be necessary to meet that department's targets for Chinook salmon on the Tuolumne River. Instead of going with the State Water Board's plan, though, which is less than what science indicates is necessary for this fish, SFPUC sued, and it offered a voluntary plan with less than half of the total river flow of a plan that the Water Board and California Department of Fish and Wildlife had already rejected as inadequate. The PUC's voluntary scheme puts on ratepayers a permanent obligation to perform all sorts of activities that a functioning river would do on its own, including washing the gravel and repressing predators. SFPUC's plan has no scientific basis. Peer review by the National Marine Commission for the National Marine Fisheries Service finds that SFPUC's own model shows that very substantial increases in flow are the most likely thing that would restore the Tuolumne's fish populations and keep them from being extirpated. I also want to note that we're going to talk a lot about salmon here, but the SFPUC's plan doesn't even pretend to provide any benefits to the lower San Joaquin River or the Delta. And that was the basis of the Water Board's plan. It's a Bay Delta water quality control plan. Currently, communities in the lower San Joaquin River, including Stockton, in particular underprivileged communities, suffer with toxic water quality that is in part related to low flows in the San Joaquin River because the San Joaquin is not getting flows from its tributaries like the Tuolumne. This summer, harmful algal blooms, which are toxic to pets and to people and fish, are going to explode in the lower San Joaquin River Valley, and it's directly tied to a lack of flows from rivers like the Tuolumne and the other tributaries to the San Joaquin River. San Francisco Public Utilities Commission is in denial about the effects of their unsustainable water deliveries, the effects that those unsustainable water deliveries have on other communities in California. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I should note also that when we get through with opening comments here, we will go to your questions. We'll ask you to raise your hand and you'll be recognized. So let me move on and move next to Peter Dreckmeyer with the Tuolumne River Trust.
Good morning. My name is Peter Dreckmeyer. I'm the policy director for the Tuolumne River Trust. And I look at a lot of documents and crunch a lot of numbers and can tell you with certainty that the SFPUC is trying to deceive people into thinking they'll run out of water, but nothing could be further from the truth. Right now, the SFPUC is sitting on enough water in their reservoirs to last 4.5 years. And at the height of the recent drought, they still had 3 years worth of water in storage. They deceive people by inflating demand projections, planning for a drought that is much longer than any in history, and assuming they will develop no new recycled water, which is an area where they're already far behind everybody else. The SFPUC staff will cite numbers, but won't explain how they got there. Fortunately, we cracked their code and can now challenge their conclusions. And just recently, we caught them cooking the books for their urban water management plan, and they were forced to adjust their demand projections. This alone reduced potential rationing by more than 25%. And there's a lot more that we're trying to correct. We can demonstrate that the SFPUC could easily manage a repeat of the worst drought on record while allowing more water to flow down the beleaguered Tuolumne River. And when I say the worst drought on record, we can look back 1,100 years based on tree ring data. Unfortunately, City Attorney Dennis Herrera is one of the worst culprits when it comes to exaggerating numbers. In February, he sent a letter to the State Water Board, and his office cited figures for current demand that were higher than the 2045 demand projections. San Francisco and the Bay Area deserve better, and we hope the SFPUC will look for a qualified outside general manager who can work well with the conservation and fishing groups. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. We next go to Mike Conroy, who's with the Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Associations. Mike,
Yeah, thanks. Just ensuring you can hear me.
we can hear you.
Perfect, thanks. My name is Mike Conroy, and I'm the Executive Director of the Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Associations, the largest association representing commercial fishing interests along the U.S. West Coast. Salmon has long been the lifeblood of California fisheries, be it commercial, recreational, or tribal. You may ask yourselves, why is PCFFA weighing in on the nominee to lead San Francisco's Public Utilities Commission? In short, his appointment could have dire consequences for the Tuolumne's already struggling salmon runs. Our fleets depend upon healthy salmon stocks, as do the communities which rely upon our activities. Salmon, in turn, are dependent upon freshwater habitat that is necessary to complete their life cycle. Every natural spawned fish is hatched from an egg deposited in a river, stream, creek, and returns to that watershed to spawn the next generation 3 to 4 years later. Our fishing opportunity was reduced significantly this summer due to low ocean abundance. The commercial fleet is participating in its second opener right now, which closes Thursday the 27th, and then we're off until June 16th when the third opener takes place. Imagine our dismay when we saw San Francisco is leading the charge to block protections for salmon and salmon fishing jobs. These are the same jobs that continue to provide Californians locally harvested sustainable seafood during the pandemic. We need a GM that will move the SFPUC in a new direction, one that supports San Francisco's and the state's fishing industry. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And finally, we go to Bill Martin with the Sierra Club Bay Chapter. Bill?
Thank you, and thank you for attending the press conference. My name is Bill Martin. I am a San Francisco resident and a customer of the SFPUC. I represent the Sierra Club Bay Chapter Water Committee. I'm also the co-chair of the Sierra Club California Water Committee, so I'm familiar with statewide issues and policies. The Sierra Club was founded in San Francisco, and the Bay Area remains its home base. San Francisco leads on environmental issues in numerous areas, such as electing public officials who support environmental protection and voting strongly for ballot initiatives for environmental improvements. Unfortunately, the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission's actions have often run at cross purposes to our city's goals for responsible, sustainable water management. The commission has fought the state of California's efforts to improve flows in the Tuolumne River. It has continued to side with the Modesto and Turlock irrigation districts instead of its own customers. And it has done all of this while ignoring the best available science on river flows and falling behind other water agencies throughout the state in modern water management practices. We need a new general manager who will fight for San Francisco values, not against them. We need a new general manager who will institute best practices, such as water reuse and recycling, already paying big dividends for Southern California water agencies. We need a new general manager who will withdraw all the lawsuits filed against the state and begin negotiating instead. Dennis Herrera, by his public statements of the past 2 weeks, is not the new general manager we need. We urge the commission to do their own search and recommend a completely different candidate for Mayor Breed to appoint. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. We can take your questions now. So actually, Dennis Whitaker, who is our IT guy, is with us. Dennis, if you want to say anything about how folks can get in line to ask questions.
Yeah, if you guys want to use the feature at the bottom and raise your hand, one of us will call on you and then I'll enable you to speak. I don't see any questions yet.
Well, while we're waiting, let me throw out to the panelists. to any of you, are there other major points that we should be making that maybe we forgot to make? I guess I can throw in one. The commercial salmon season this year has been cut by at least half of a normal season. The recreational season has been cut about the same, and it's due to low numbers of salmon. The reason we have low numbers of salmon basically is because of the problems they encounter in the Central Valley, in the rivers that they're born in, the rivers that they rear in. And because the seasons have been cut, what we've seen so far in this very windy spring that we've had is some of the commercial fishermen being out there on days when normally you would not want to be out on the water. So they're taking risks to try and make ends meet, try and pay the bills. And if San Francisco acted more environmentally responsible, these types of predicaments would not exist.
John, I'll make a quick comment. The Tuolumne River once had one of the best salmon runs in the state, over 100,000 salmon spawning every year. This last year, there were 1,000. Someone has to ask, how is the Tuolumne being mismanaged and who's in charge? Well, the irrigation districts commissioned their science and conveniently concluded that the fish don't really need that much water against all the best available science. And the SFPUC embraced that science and is supporting their position. And we have to ask why. One answer is they have a contractual obligation to follow the irrigation districts on fish flow issues. This dates back to 1995. So they have given up San Francisco's ability to think for itself, to make decisions for itself, to defend the environmental values of San Franciscans and other Bay Area residents. And it's just appalling.
I'd like to refer back to a comment that John Rosenfield made earlier. As some of you may know, the Sierra Club has embarked on a number of initiatives relative to equity among its members and among the citizens of the United States. And one of the key issues around this is doing our best as an environmental organization to ensure that people all over the state and the country get equal access to high quality water and to environmental protection. And and certainly we are completely assured that the people of San Francisco support these efforts of greater equity among our citizens. And one area in which the state is failing severely is in the harmful algal blooms that John was referring to earlier. And I think this is one area that has not received the attention that it deserves. When the people that live out in the Central Valley, especially in the eastern area of the Delta, have faced these blooms now for several years, and they continue to get worse. I hope that we can all do our best to help these folks get access to better water. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. It looks like we have a question from Robin Perchia. Robin, I think I've hit the right button to allow you to talk.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. I believe it's the SFPUC commissioners that are voting on Herrera's nomination, correct? When do you anticipate that might happen?
Chris, Peter, do you want to take that?
It's hard to say. They're in a little bit of a quandary right now because it is their job to forward nominations to the mayor, and then she ultimately would make the decision. But she's requested that they nominate Dennis Herrera. And so they have this dilemma of, do they do a national search knowing that few people are going to apply if they think it's already a done deal? So they're taking up the issue tomorrow afternoon. There's not going to be a vote on Mr. Herrera, but we might get some more insights into the timeline.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the panel want to comment on the question? Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from the panelists? I see no other questions in the queue. Dennis, am I missing anything there?
Nope. I think that was it.
Then again, we've got a letter out. I think most of you received the letter with our position opposing Herrera as the next general manager of the SFPUC. If you need a copy, get a hold of any of us or go to sf4water.org or to goldenstatesalmon.org. You can find the letter at either of those locations. And I want to thank everybody for participating today, and I will leave it there. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.